really interesting article on the weekend, and it's titled "Happy but Feeling the Stress." And basically what it says is there's a new survey of Kiwi attitudes towards life which reveals a split national personality, testifying to the well-known gap between what people say and what people do. The survey, called Eye on New Zealand, was commissioned by ad agency G2, and it offers a bit of a snapshot into our thoughts on money and the future and a few other things. So a couple of key things from this is that we're dogged by worries. 80% worry that there was very little privacy left in New Zealand. 69% believe New Zealand was at significant risk of terrorists, which is that's a huge worry. And 88% found modern life very stressful. So coming on to some of the money things, we've got 87% of people believe that having enough money is really important to our happiness. 88% of us see an increasingly gap between the rich and poor. 32% of us are now very worried about household finances, and 44% of us are somewhat worried. So, you know, that's a pretty high levels of stress. But what was interesting is that the research repeatedly found the gaps between people's values. So it's no matter how sincerely we held those values or how worried we actually were, we weren't actually doing anything about it. And I guess the two key things that I picked up from this article was just, you know, the amount of stress that we seem to be having around money and just around life in general, versus the fact that we don't seem to want to do anything about it. And just that whole perception about people, you know, 88% of people believing that the gap between the rich and the poor is increasing. I mean, that's the vast majority of people in New Zealand. But what I've got to wonder about is how real that is. I mean, obviously people's perceptions are their actual reality, but you know, how true is that? Because when I look at, you know, clients of mine, and, you know, I've got a number of clients who on the surface appear quite wealthy, but when you actually look at their balance sheets, they don't have as much as what people think. And because we are a society that we can today, you know, we've got very high levels of debt, we've got enormous amounts of consumer debt, that we can often borrow way beyond our means. So just because we're living in a lovely house in a nice suburb doesn't necessarily mean we've got a lot of money, because we might have a 90% mortgage. And or, you know, numerous credit cards, kids in private school, cars on finance. You know, I read recently, I think there was 400 cars on New Zealand on finance. So what people perceive that others have and what they do have are actually two quite different things. And I think people get a bit tied up into the fact of what they perceive other people actually have. Whereas in my view, the key thing is just to not worry about what everyone else is doing, is actually just to concentrate on your own circumstances, and just, you know, you take some action. And I think, you know, while some of the things in front of you may seem quite large, the key thing about taking action and successfully achieving our goals is just around taking one small step at a time and keep taking those steps. So, you know, I guess in summary, don't worry about what everyone else is doing, just worry about what you're doing and start taking steps.